When you pick up any reputable history book, Chapter 1 is, of course, the year 1993. It had it all. Dinosaurs, Frasier, the special edition of Terminator 2 coming to VHS and Laserdisc, and most importantly, the release of Super Mario All-Stars, a collection of Super Mario Bros. 1, 2 and 3, as well as the Lost Levels making its debut outside of Japan, all with a fresh coat of 16-bit paint. Fast forward to 10 years ago, Nintendo celebrated the Mustachioed Plumber's 25th anniversary with a re-release on the Wii, including a soundtrack CD and a history booklet. And to my disappointment, this was the original version of the game rather than the one that included Super Mario World that released only a year later. If you wanted to play that, you had to cough up an extra 800 Wii points in the shop channel. Soundtrack CD was pretty disappointing too. It featured one song from each of the mainline games, and literally half of the tracklist is just sound effects. So not great considering only a year later we got an amazing 45-minute Zelda orchestral arrangement for its anniversary. The history booklet was kinda neat, if a little short. It included some original artwork, images of some hand-drawn design documents, and some fun trivia, like did you know Miyamoto had a hamster? And of course, to celebrate the 35th anniversary, Nintendo hosted a special direct in September 2020, featuring some upcoming in-game events, announcements, and sheer unbridled capitalism. There's just something about this guy that compels people to spend money. The main attraction of the direct was the official unveiling of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, and the news that it was coming out in 2 weeks. I don't even know if I made it that far in the trailer. My memory's pretty fuzzy before I blacked out. The next thing I remember is waking up 2 weeks later with a copy of 3D All-Stars and a pair of Mario Sunshine basketball shoes.
I don't even play basketball.
The collection had been rumoured since all the way back in March 2020, with Video Games Chronicle reporting that there would be a number of Mario games getting Switch remasters for the occasion, as well as a brand new Paper Mario, so they were pretty spot on. I'm sure I'm not in the minority when I say that I've always preferred 3D Mario games over their 2D counterparts. Not that they're bad or anything, but a new 3D game coming out just feels like so much more of an event, whereas sometimes I lie awake at night forgetting that New Super Mario Bros. 2 was a game that actually released. There's just something about that Z-axis that does it for me. I've always been a proponent of extra dimensions, the more the better as far as I'm concerned. Personally, I can't wait for 4D Mario. But until then, we have the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection. What can you say about Super Mario 64 that hasn't already been said? No, seriously.
Super Mario 64 is a free Masonic and luminous digital ritual. God damn it!
I mean, the game pretty much revolutionized 3D platforming. What have you done lately? I'm sure there's nobody out there saying, you know, I've heard some good things about this game, I might give it a try. You've either played it and you love it, or you haven't played it and you probably still love it anyway. And, well, it's Mario 64. It's pretty great. Even though I've played it so much over the years, it's something I find myself booting up every once in a while and always have a blast. It's quite telling of the replay value. Either that or these things. While Super Mario World and All-Stars were some of the first games I ever played, this was the first game I played where I kinda knew what I was doing. And considering I played it on N64, DS, Wii Virtual Console, Wii U Virtual Console, and now Switch, it must be doing something right to keep me coming back. Rather unlike Super Mario Sunshine. This is one that's always eluded me. The games I played growing up were determined by whatever consoles my older siblings got. They got a SNES, I played the SNES. They got an N64, I played the N64. They got a PS2, I didn't play the GameCube. By the time I became the older sibling and got a Wii, I assumed I wasn't missing out on much. I mean, Mario's up in space now, who cares about his holiday from 5 years ago? There were big GameCube releases I always wanted to try though, the main ones being Sunshine and Wind Waker. I'd occasionally see them in used game stores through the years, but always for extortionate prices, so I never bothered. And when I finally got to try Wind Waker HD on the Wii U, I figured we'd get a Sunshine remaster eventually. And my patience paid off only 18 years later, good God. Suffice to say, I was excited to try it. Super Mario Galaxy. The game that probably had the quickest pitch meeting ever. It's in the middle ground between played to death and not at all. I was really excited for it coming out back in the early days of the Wii, played through it once it launched, loved it, but hadn't picked it up since. Whenever I occasionally got that Galaxy itch, I found myself revisiting Galaxy 2 instead, so I'm overdue for a playthrough of the original for sure. I'd imagine there was a lot of pressure on the developers for taking someone best known for running left to right while jumping and using the bleeding edge of 90s technology to make them do this. Wall kicks, long jumps, backflips, side somersaults all became part of Mario's staple moveset that has remained relatively consistent through the years since 64, and it's rather impressive that they managed to nail it on their first 3D outing. Every time I revisit 64, it's still fun to experiment with new ways to traverse the levels, and it's surprising how well the controls for this 24-year-old game hold up. That is not to say it hasn't aged quite noticeably. It's not as responsive or refined as the newer titles, and understandably so, especially in the camera department, because the game literally has a camera department. You tend to forget that you're actually watching a live broadcast like a wacky Truman Show because the camera that you can move around the player was such a novel concept at the time. It also allows me to direct my frustrations with the uncooperative camera at Lakitu. It's especially annoying when you need to do tricky jumps or cross narrow platforms, but most of the time it does a serviceable job, so the game still feels really good to play, except when it doesn't. A lot of people seem to really dislike the camera controls in Sunshine, but I thought they were pretty good, a bit tricky in tight enclosed spaces, but pretty solid overall. It was a welcome improvement moving from mimicking 64's 4 face buttons to one whole stick. The controls feel pretty tight, and just running around Delfino Plaza is a lot of fun. Flood is interesting. From a story point of view, I'm just not crazy about it as a character. It seems kinda forced. I probably would have preferred it to be just a device that you get from Professor Egad, like Mario bumps into him on his vacation or something. But actually using the thing can be pretty darn cool. It augments the movement and combat pretty significantly. Diving into a slip and slide for extra speed, hitting enemies with water while doing a spin jump or backflip, even just cleaning up goop is a lot more enjoyable than I thought it would be. The hover nozzle is super versatile, and it's pretty essential for getting across large gaps or giving you more control for a precision landing. The rocket and turbo nozzles are cool too, but a lot more situational and less useful overall, but still pretty fun. Though I found myself missing the long jump and regular backflip now that the trigger button's been commandeered by Flood, especially in the secret stages. So their return in Galaxy was a welcome one. It feels fantastic to play. The gravity mechanic is great, running around spherical planets is so cool even though it hurts my brain a little. The spin attack can give you more options for taking on enemies rather than just jumping on them, and it's handy if you're trying to get more star bits. It's also great to give your jumps that little bit extra height or length without the assistance of a literal jetpack. Playing it right after Sunshine, I found myself constantly trying to move the camera, which you can only do in certain wide open spaces, but most of the time you just can't, so it took some gentle reminders to readjust to the fixed camera that you're stuck with the majority of the time. Games that were originally meant to be played on this, and these, now meant to be playable on this, required varying degrees of adjustments to be made to the controls. Mario 64 is pretty low maintenance in this regard. It remains pretty much untouched from previous Virtual Console ports control-wise, not a whole lot to say really. GameCube controller support was added to Sunshine by way of a software update, which also allows you to invert different aspects of the camera controls for each game to suit the player's preference. By the time this update rolled out in mid-November, however, I had already played through each of them, but thought that the changes made for the Switch controllers were fine. The lack of analog triggers meant Flood's spraying had to be mapped to 2 different buttons, one to spray while running, the other to stand still and aim, which as a newcomer suited me well enough, but having them bound to the same trigger is certainly a more elegant solution. The customizable look inversion options also allowed Flood's aiming to be re-inverted, which was a welcome change for people who were used to the original. Even though I'm not an inverted camera type of guy, it's neat to play the game the way God intended. The same can't be said for Galaxy, however. When playing docked, Galaxy pretty much swaps the IR pointer controls for gyro ones, and it works pretty well. You'll find yourself recentering the cursor pretty often, but it's a super quick button press away, and it's a really good substitute for the Wii Remote. I even thought the gyro controls worked much better for the ray surfing and ball rolling levels. I used the Pro Controller for the vast majority of my time at the game, so controlling the pointer with 2 hands does feel a bit odd at first. If you want a more authentic Wii-like experience, playing with the Joy-Cons works nicely and feels a bit more natural to pick up the star bits one-handed. You can still shake the controller to spin attack like on the Wii, but now it's mapped to the X or Y buttons, I find it hard to go back. If you're playing the game in handheld mode, you have to control the cursor with the touchscreen. I find it works well for the Bubble Blast levels, but pretty awkward for literally anything else, especially if you're collecting or shooting starbits during busier moments. The gyro controls are effortless in comparison when you're collecting them in the background while going through a level. Having to quickly switch your hand from the screen to the buttons isn't ideal, so I don't really get why they couldn't just have an option for gyro controls in handheld. Playing in tabletop mode would be a good shout if you're able to, but if you have a Switch Lite, your options are a bit more limited unless you shell out extra cash for a Pro Controller or look like a serial killer if you're playing the game in public. It's interesting to see the difference in level designs between each of the games in the collection and 3D Mario games as a whole. And all that we've seen about Bowser's Fury so far, I'm wondering where it would rank on this arbitrary scale I just made up. It sort of looks like a hybrid between 3D World and Odyssey, even though they take quite different approaches, but I digress. 64 and Sunshine levels remain relatively consistent between the different stars or shines, with a few notable exceptions depending on the objective or boss. In 64, most of the stars in a given level are obtainable right away. It was always fun jumping into a painting looking to get a certain star with the clue that you're given, and end up coming out with a completely different one. Whereas Sunshine and Galaxy are a lot more focused on your singular objective, with the exception of some secret stars or shines. Sunshine seems to encourage a lot more exploration, not only with the secret shine sprites, but blue coins that can be exchanged for more shines. Though personally, after getting all of the main shines in each of the levels, and the more obvious blue coins, I didn't really have the motivation to go back through searching every nook and cranny for the rest. I think I prefer the linearity of Galaxy in this regard. You do get a few galaxies with wide open areas that are great to just run around and see everything, but many of them have a brand new course of planets depending on the star you selected, and the platforming experience is tailored exactly for that star. This lets it seamlessly cram in so many cool ideas and mechanics into the game, it's crazy. And it's pretty evident given the amount of galaxies with one star, where the developers just had a great idea so they made a whole level for it, rather than shoehorning it into a limited number of worlds. And the setting is just perfect for this. Like, what about a planet with a big fish skeleton? Yeah, sure, why not? Where to next? It feels like jumping into the paintings in 64. It lets you experience a good bit of variety in the settings of the levels, but then brings you back to the hub world that ties everything together nicely. And while I feel this is a strength of these two in particular, Sunshine isn't really able to do this to the same extent. With this, you have so many different galaxies: Honey Hive, Toy Time, Gusty Garden, Freeze Flame, Matter Splatter, Loop de Loop, Melty Molten, Ghostly Galaxy. 64, you have Babon Battlefield, Dire Docks, Hazy Maze Cave, Shifting Sandland, Tiny Huge Island, even Tick-Tock Clock as much as I hate it. Each of the designs is unique and memorable. And in Sunshine, you've got, you know, the one with the water. It's on a beach, I think. The whole game takes place on one island, so it's understandable why some of the levels can feel a bit samey since water has to be readily available and there isn't quite as much variety outside of the secret stages, which are probably my favourite parts of the game and makes it feel like a Mario Galaxy tech demo. Sunshine has some really strong levels, don't get me wrong, but the central themes and the flood mechanic limit what's on offer and make it seem a bit bland compared to the other offerings. Though I suppose the upside to this is that Isle Delfino feels like much more of a cohesive, lived-in world with new locations, and having residents and enemies that are different from the usual Mushroom Kingdom assortment is refreshing too. Even small things like seeing where the levels are located on the island map and being able to see them in the distance is a nice touch. Delfino Plaza is a great hub world, and a pretty good Smash stage. There's extra shines and secret levels to discover, and it's just cool to run around experimenting with Mario's movement and the different flood nozzles. I also appreciate having random NPCs in the area. It's something I quite missed in the Comet Observatory. It's lovely to look at, it just feels a bit too empty considering the size of it. Not a whole lot to do besides listening to the most depressing bedtime story I've ever heard. I actually prefer their approach for Galaxy 2, where they just cram everything into Starship Mario with a creative and lively little hub to run around in between levels on the map. But Peach's Castle in Mario 64 is, for me, still the pinnacle of level where you jump into stuff to teleport to other levels. It's not as grand as the Comet Observatory or as lively as Delfino Plaza, but it's just so comfy. That feeling of freedom, jumping between the trees or swimming in the lake outside, opening new doors, finding secrets, even dumb stuff like trying to avoid the trap door or convincing yourself that maybe if you run up the infinite staircase for like another half an hour you'll get to the top. Something I was surprised by playing Sunshine for the first time is just how difficult it was at times, even with the generous health bar. Some levels ranged from really tricky to making me want to turn off my Switch and just never play the game ever again. The very last level especially was so infuriating, and it was a pretty big letdown for me. Whereas Galaxy still felt rewarding, even though it's definitely on the easier side, although Prankster Comets can spice things up a bit, adding things like time limits, faster enemy movement, and reduced HP. And 64, while not the most difficult either, can be pretty unforgiving in certain levels, where messing up just one jump pretty much puts you back to the start. Again, pretty annoying, especially considering how dodgy the camera can be at times. But for me, the hardest thing about the game is the wing cap. I just can't use this thing. It's the same in Mario World with the cape. Something about Mario being in the air just breaks my brain. I can't control it for the life of me. And I can just never get enough altitude, and there's levels where it's all in the sky, and yeah, that's just me done. There's also the metal and vanish caps, which let you sink to the bottom of a body of water or walk through walls for a short period of time, and on one occasion, both at once. They're not quite as prominent as the wing cap, but I've always liked that they were so different from the more traditional Mario power-ups. I also like how they each have their own mini-level to complete before unlocking them, like with switches in Mario World. The power-ups in the 3 games seem to be quite scripted in their use. If you want to complete the level, you gotta use it here, here, and here. They're a tool needed to complete certain objectives, usually based around that ability. Quite different from the 2D games or 3D Land and World, where power-ups can carry over between levels and you can choose when to use them, but a lot of the time aren't essential. Galaxy power-ups have a nice mix of both familiar and newer ones, some more memorable than others. I genuinely forgot that Spring Mario was a thing until I got to the Toy Time Galaxy again. There's also some that stay with you until you take damage, while others are time limited, which creates a sense of urgency in their use, especially as the music speeds up before they run out. But the variety on offer is great. They never feel overdone and are always fun to use. Well, most of the time anyway. The Ice Flower is probably the standout for me. Its implementation is so much better than its 2D counterpart. It gives you extra speed skating around while leaving ice platforms behind you, and it's a lot more fun than just being a fire flower, but with ice. As for power-ups, Sunshine is the odd one out yet again. Flood pretty much is the power-up, and it's stuck to your back for the vast majority of the game, and it already changes so much about how Mario usually plays that I can kinda see why there isn't much else. It's hardly accidental.
I knew I forgot something. Oh.
Yoshi's a nice addition to the game too, and adds a bit more utility to your arsenal. Heating enemies, flutter jump, Yoshi stuff. But why does he Bokan stuff? Why does that stuff turn into platforms? Why does he dissolve in water? I'm thinking too critically about Yoshi lore again, aren't I? One area that seems to exponentially improve between the games in the collection is the bosses. Those in 64 are fun, if a little basic. While the 3 bouts with Bowser get a bit repetitive, some of the others in the game are pretty memorable and hold up fairly well. Sunshine I find a bit more hit or miss. There were some that I had a lot of fun with, like Gooper Blooper, Mecha Bowser, and Elimouth was such a cool idea, and introducing Petey Piranha to the series gets it a couple of points in my book. But way too many of the same big goo monsters for my liking, and the final boss was just kind of alright if you ask me. Galaxy is similar to 64 in that the Bowser battles follow the same basic formula, but it just works so well each time, building to a pretty fantastic final boss. And there are some real standout encounters that are probably my favourite in any 3D Mario game. King Caliente, Dino Piranha, Mega Leg, and Bouldergeist were all so good. The Mario series isn't exactly known for gripping stories. Each of the games pretty much amounts to Bowser kidnaps Peach but in space, and Mario has to clear his name after being wrongfully accused of graffiti, also Bowser Jr. kidnaps Peach. Though it looks like the two of them are getting on pretty well these days. So you'd need to be pretty sad to start nitpicking the plot. What, so Mario was found guilty even though he arrived at Isle Delfino just minutes prior to being arrested? But seriously, Yeah, Sunshine's story isn't the best. I don't care for Flood as a character, and I don't care for how they made me try to care about Flood as a character in the last 2 minutes of the game. The voice acting isn't great, but not without a certain cheesy charm, kinda like the Mario Bros. Super Show. I feel bad criticising it for trying something a bit different, whereas 64 always seems to be let off the hook for being about as bare bones as it comes. There's a letter promising cake, you fight Bowser, you get cake, classic 3-act structure. And while Galaxy is the same old story, it just kicks everything up a notch. Bowser doesn't just kidnap Peach, he kidnaps her entire castle. The stakes, the scope, the music score, everything is done in just so much more epic proportions. It's actually pretty ominous at times too. When I first played it years ago, I never gave much thought to Rosalina, but she really grew on me this time around, and her storybook chapters that are unlocked as you progress are surprisingly sad for a Mario game. Each of the games in 3D All-Stars are great in their own ways. Super Mario 64 is iconic. It's a major nostalgia trip for me, but it's definitely showing its age, even with my rose-tinted glasses. The fundamental concepts it built made a solid foundation that future 3D Marios are based on, and it's impressive how many elements Nintendo knocked out of the park in his first 3D game. Super Mario Sunshine was an interesting experiment that I enjoyed a lot more than I thought I would have. It's a pretty divisive game in the series, and it's easy to see why. It can be frustrating, glitchy, and flawed, but it did a lot right, and I had fun with it. It's certainly towards the bottom of my list of favourite Mario games, but I was glad to finally try it for myself, and it was a refreshing change of pace from the rest. Super Mario Galaxy was an absolute joy to revisit. I had a stupid grin on my face pretty much start to finish. Controlling Mario feels fantastic. The game looks amazing and runs flawlessly. The setting is perfect with a huge variety in galaxies, and the orchestrated music tracks are gorgeous. As I mentioned before, I'd always preferred the sequel with how quick it is to jump into, having Yoshi, the slightly harder difficulty, and thought it had better power-ups on offer. But after playing 1 on the Switch, I think I need to play through 2 again just to make sure. I only wish I could on the Switch. 3D All-Stars' notable absence of Galaxy 2 made me feel the same as when I learnt that Super Mario World wasn't included in the 25th anniversary All-Stars on Wii. Not surprising, but disappointed nonetheless. Especially considering that none of these games are full remakes, but rather pseudo-remasters. All of the games are emulated, but running at a higher resolution with a couple tweaks here and there. All of the work done to adapt the Wii controls on Switch was already there. Surely the amount of effort required to include Galaxy 2 would have been minimal. Luckily, I'm not the type to hold a grudge. The games do look really good running at a higher resolution. Mario 64 is running at 720p 30 frames per second. They've also replaced the HUD and text elements in the game so it looks much sharper than previous Virtual Console releases. And it's nice to finally get confirmation that this blob I've been looking at for years is in fact Mario's face. Sunshine got a nice bump in resolution to 1080p and it runs in widescreen so it looks better than ever, but it still runs at its original 30fps frame rate. They're not unplayable or anything, but it's very noticeable going back to play these two after experiencing Galaxy at its original 60fps. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for 64 to have a widescreen option and for each of the games to be running at 1080p 60 frames per second. The most modern title of the collection handles it with no issues, and there's already emulator mods for these games that do exactly that, so it seems kinda lazy. Don't get me wrong, I love Mario. Just look at me, this is the face of a guy who loves Mario. And as much as I enjoyed my time with 3D All-Stars, it's just not a very good collection. Okay, so it's got the 3 games on the cartridge. It's officially met the minimum requirements. What else is there? Well, you get the soundtracks for each of the games that you can play in the menu or in a music player mode. It's nice to have, and certainly better than the last time round. I was actually starting to feel a little silly handing the DJ my Super Mario Bros. 25th anniversary soundtrack CD every time I wanted to make a request. Other than the soundtracks and a 4-second intro video every time you boot up the game, there isn't really anything else. You're missing some of the creature comforts from Virtual Console or the retro libraries on Switch, like creating suspend points or browsing digital manuals. This was a cool feature for seeing some original artwork or even just a piece of the series' history. I'm sure there's got to be some PDFs of the manuals floating around Nintendo HQ somewhere. Adding them in would have been so easy to do. Mario 64 is from a time where cardboard game boxes had shorter lifespans than mayflies, so the Wii U Virtual Console was my first time actually reading it. I had no idea that you could warp multiple parts of Mario's face by holding the R button. I'd gone most of my life thinking you could only do it one at a time, which is crazy considering the amount of times I've played it. Not that it's a big secret or anything, but without stumbling across it by accident, I just wouldn't have known without skimming through the manual. Screenshots or footage from early builds of the game, trailers, adverts or concept art all would have been so easy to include and really interesting to see. Even the artwork that's displayed when you're booting up the games, they're already on the cartridge, just put them in a folder to let me look through them. Or hell, why not Luigi's Casino minigames from Mario 64 DS? Teach a whole new generation of kids to play poker. It just feels like a real missed opportunity. Literally anything else would have been nice, but it's just the music and the 3 games.
So, am I glad I bought them? Yeah. Why did I buy them? I don't really know, and can I pull them off? That's beside the point. The thing is, I'll clearly buy anything. I mean, look at all the Switch ports of Wii U games I bought again for full price. Did I get my money's worth buying them twice? Probably not. But it's nice to have the option to play them on the go, on a system people actually bought, and of course with that new funky mode. Or funky new mode in Europe, for some reason.
Either way, the value proposition for bundling in 3 Mario games together is hard to overlook, even with the lack of extra content. If you've played them already and you love them, sure, go for it, but who am I kidding, you probably already bought it. If, like me, you might have missed 1 or 2 and you like Mario, I'd say buy it. Or if you haven't played any of them and own a Switch, you should absolutely buy it. And you'd better act fast, as you can only purchase the game until March 31st, 2021. In an interview with Polygon, Nintendo of America president Doug Bowser said that this is because of the celebration aspect of the 35th anniversary. Those celebrations just happened to stop at the end of their fiscal year, who knew? They're also doing this limited release strategy with the Western localization for the first Fire Emblem game. Both cases are remasters of older games as part of a series anniversary. And Doug was pretty vague when speaking about the company's plans after March, so I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a regular thing for these sorts of events. Because the games on 3D All-Stars are running on an emulator that would likely be capable of playing other N64, GameCube and Wii titles, they would likely be added to the library of retro titles that you need a Switch Online subscription to access over the next couple years, so these games would effectively become selling points for the service to late Switch adopters who missed out on the limited run. Whatever the reason, limiting the supply for both physical and digital releases to create a sense of urgency for consumers to buy the game is a bit of a slimy move by Nintendo, and one that has clearly worked. So yeah, I got some grievances with this limited release strategy of theirs.
Then again, I've absolutely no willpower, so I'm just gonna give them my money maybe just this once, sign a change.org petition, and I'm sure they'll come to their senses eventually. Right?
Super Luigi Galaxy!